And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the unceded and traditional territory of the Tsimshian people. Pierre Poilievre is a Canadian politician who has served as leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and leader of official opposition since 2022. After members handed him a strong mandate to take the party in a new direction, he redefined the party's relationship with the press. On today's Open Connection, leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre.
First, we need to incentivize municipalities to deliver faster building permits. We as Canadians rank second last when it comes to the speed of building permits out of all OECD countries. And that means higher housing prices. In Vancouver, for example, the cost of getting a permit, dealing with zoning, paying the development charges and taxes, adds up to $650,000 per unit of housing. 650 grand, crazy. So what we need to do is incentivize municipalities to speed that up, and a Poilievre government will link the number of dollars, of infrastructure dollars the feds give a given city to the number of houses that actually get built, so that we incentivize the City Hall to speed up and lower the cost of building permits. Secondly, I'm going to require that every federally funded transit station have pre-approved permitting for high-density housing around it so that our young people can live next to transit. They don't even have to own a car. Third, I'm going to sell off 15% of the 37,000 federal buildings that are already underutilized, sell them off, turn them into housing. So, in other words, we got to stop printing all this money and start building houses. We've been meeting with First Nations the last several days and hearing their concerns, and I was just meeting with Chief Bennett yesterday. He held a wonderful feast to welcome me to his community, and I look forward to working with him and others on the goal of giving First Nations more control of their money, land, and decisions, making it easier and more advantageous to opt out of the Indian Act for those communities that want out, and speeding up treaty processes and other settlement agreements that will release First Nations from all of the controls imposed by the department in Ottawa. Top-down, paternalistic, Ottawa knows best, or the Crown knows best, has been a disaster for hundreds of years. We know this. And the solution is to give First Nations control of their own destinies, and also get out of the way of economic opportunities so that they can generate more own source revenues and decide how to spend those revenues without any interference from Ottawa. My infrastructure program will focus on economic pathways. We used to have the Asian Gateway, Asia-Pacific Gateway as an initiative, which basically was designed to remove all the bottlenecks along the routes to the coast, so that we could get more Canadian product off to the fastest growing market in the world, that being Asia. And I would continue to support that. We also got to fix, we got to get the Vancouver port functioning properly. I think it's ranked 368th out of 370 right now. We got to speed it up to simplify transit of goods there. But I'll be supporting all the terminals, the ports, and all the other economic and trade infrastructure in the Pacific. I want to put people back in charge of their lives, put the common people first, end the inflationary deficits that have bid up the cost of living, cap government spending by bringing in a dollar for dollar law that requires Ottawa find $1 of savings for every new dollar of spending. I'm going to reverse Trudeau and Singh's plan to triple the carbon tax. They are going to bankrupt people with higher energy bills. I'm going to cancel that, and instead of taxes, focus on technology to protect our environment. We're going to become an energy superpower again as a country, and I'm going to make sure that the working people and the First Nations are the principal beneficiaries of those jobs and those opportunities. Well, it's time to have a Prime Minister that will stand on the side of the working class again, show respect for the people who do the nation's work, and for the rural people, including by respecting the hunters and anglers and sport shooters who've been under attack needlessly by a government and a coalition bent on mistreating the law-abiding and licensed firearms owners. I think that we should go after the repeat violent criminals and the gun smugglers. That's how we're going to keep our streets safe. And then finally, I think we need to stop giving out taxpayer-funded drugs. That has just led to an addiction crisis, and that has we're on the track for another record-breaking number of overdose deaths. I want to take the money away from that, put it into treatment and recovery, so we can save people's lives and get them on a good track.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
We are at the site of the biggest single private sector infrastructure project in the history of Canada. This is the LNG Canada project right here. Look around, this is the place where natural gas from Western Canada will come to be compressed, reduced in temperature down to minus 160 degrees Celsius, so it's liquefied, put on a ship, sent off to Asia and other world markets to shut down dirty coal-fired plants and replace them with clean, Canadian, ethically produced natural gas. There were 15 of these type of projects proposed when Trudeau became Prime Minister. Not a single one is yet completed.
Thank you for staying with us. Ontario's Bill 28, also known as Keeping Students in Class Act, draws on the notwithstanding clause within the Canadian Constitution to impose a contract on more than 55,000 CUPE-represented custodians, early childhood educators, educational assistants, and administrative staff. Pierre Poilievre responds to the CUPE strike as we return to the conversation.
I have a lot of sympathy for the workers. The support workers in our schools in Ontario are angels. They're unbelievable, and they are underpaid, to be honest. Like my little girl goes to a school, she has special needs, and she relies on those support workers. They only make 40 grand a year. It's barely enough to pay rent. So I can understand why they're fighting for more pay. I hope the province will give them a fair deal and give them an opportunity to make some more money, because their work is essential. Without them, I don't know what happened to a lot of kids. So I have a lot of sympathy for them. Home heating bills are going to go up 100% this winter, according to some energy analysts. And that's based on taxes, but also on energy shortages. We have over 1,000 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, but we're not developing it because anti-energy laws prevent us from getting the stuff out of the ground. And so we could be developing natural gas right across Canada. In fact, we could develop it and liquefy it and ship it to the rest of the world to great benefit of our people here in this country. When Trudeau took office, there were 15 LNG projects proposed. Not a single one of them is complete. Not one. LNG Canada is the closest one. It's not done yet. But that could be major revenue for First Nations, provinces, and families. But we need to get the government out of the way. We have enormous advantages with natural gas. Not only do we have, I think, the 6th biggest supply of it on Earth, right here in Canada. We have the shortest shipping distance to Asia of any North American country. The U.S. Gulf Coast is a longer distance to travel. We also have the shortest shipping distance to Europe from the East Coast. Finally, to liquefy natural gas, you need to cool it down. What do we have in Canada? Lots of cold weather. So it's actually 25% cheaper to liquefy gas in Canada than it is in the U.S. Gulf Coast because of our cold weather. Finally, an advantage to the weather we have here. And we've got hydro in Manitoba, well, I should say in BC, Newfoundland, and Quebec. And that hydro can power liquefaction facilities without any emissions. So the point is, we can liquefy natural gas with the least energy and the fewest emissions of any country on Earth. This would be the most environmentally friendly LNG on Earth, right here in Canada. But we have to get the government out of the way and allow the investors and the workers to build these projects. We could have displaced this Russian gas but you have to produce it first and ship it. And we have gas we could pipeline over to the East Coast, liquefy it in some place like Saguenay, Quebec. Newfoundland has a proposed project. There's a LNG terminal project in New Brunswick under consideration. All these projects could furnish gas onto ships, cool it, liquefy it, ship it, get it to Germany, break European dependence on Putin so that we can turn those dollars into paychecks for our people. We can do a lot of good work with petrochemical development. We can do carbon capture and storage. We can extract hydrogen from gas, and if you capture the carbon in the ground, then it becomes a clean source of hydrogen. Potentially, hydrogen could be a major fuel source for the future. Of course, you need natural gas to produce nitrogen fertilizer. We need that fertilizer to grow our crops. So all of that is potential for Canada to become more self-reliant and more energy independent. Natural gas is definitely part of the solution, and we can produce and upgrade and use it in the most environmentally friendly manner possible. Under Harper, we managed to get a softwood lumber deal that lasted 5 years and saw the Americans actually reimburse $4 billion of tariffs. Since that deal lapsed, Trudeau has failed to get us a deal, and now we're back paying tariffs on our legitimate products. So we need a prime minister who will go to Washington with a mission to nail down a softwood lumber deal for the first time in a decade, and that's what I'm going to do. Well, I'm just very excited about the opportunities for First Nations communities to harness our energy and other resources and have a very prosperous future that will pay for schools and paychecks, skill development, hospitals, poverty elimination. All this stuff can happen, and I want to be part of it. I want to remove the government gatekeepers that stand in the way and put First Nations back in charge of their lives here in the freest country on earth. We need to come to these remote communities. It's always, Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and MTV, as they call it, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver. Great cities, but we've got to get up to these remote communities where a lot of things are happening, a lot of opportunities here. And it's too often big cities forget about communities like this, and that's why we need more leaders and MPs to come and visit and understand the potential and work with the communities here to make it happen.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Bordering on the Pacific Ocean, the North Coast Economic Region is an area of spectacular forests, majestic mountains, and rugged coastlines. The economy has diversified in recent years as a result of new capacity at the Port of Prince Rupert, ports in Kitimat and in Stewart, major investments in aluminum shelter at Kitimat. Let us return to the conversation as Pierre responds to some of the natural resources here in the Northwest.
Well, I wanted to get up here and meet with First Nations, with entrepreneurs, workers, to talk about how we can unleash our economy by removing government gatekeepers and developing our resources. We have 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. We have forestry. We have agricultural products that need to get to ports and terminals to hit world markets. All those things require development. But in Canada, it's very hard to get anything built these days. Basically, we have one of the slowest building permit times in the OECD. We have governments in Ottawa that stand in the way and burden projects with taxes and with red tape. And that keeps workers down and drives production out of our country, makes us more dependent on the rest of the world rather than self-reliant. I also want to put First Nations back in charge of their lives by removing the paternalism and excessive control in Ottawa. Too much control by our central government and not enough autonomy for the First Nations people that want it. So I'm here to listen to First Nations and how we can give them more control over their land, money, and decisions. These are some of the subjects that I'm discussing when I'm out here in northern British Columbia. I'm here in Buenos Aires and obviously Kitimat to see the LNG Canada project.
And I want to find out how we can do more of that for all of the people. But reality's back, and here we are 2 years after the pandemic began, and government is 30% more expensive. Our debt has been doubled. Our inflation is, as I said, a generational high. And we got 1 in 5 Canadians skipping meals because they can't afford food. It's time the Prime Minister was held to account for having created this mess. He overspent. He spent more than he needed to. He's had too much power and too much central control, and the people are paying the price for all of his mistakes. And it's time to put people back in charge of their own lives by making this the freest country on earth. Well, what I'm hearing is that people want to develop. Kitimat has been, and all of the Wet'suwet'en communities along the Coastal GasLink pipeline route are benefiting from that project. They get jobs, skills, revenue for social services, opportunity for their communities, independence from Ottawa. These are wonderful developments, and I wanted to learn from the businesses and, more importantly, the First Nations who've done this, how we can do it elsewhere. Maybe not natural gas, it doesn't go everywhere, but in other places it might be tourism, as they do in the Okanagan nations, where they have wonderful golf courses and wineries and leasehold real estate developments that are giving revenue to Penticton and Soyuz and Kelowna. And in Alberta, it might be oil projects. In other parts of the country, it might be different kinds of developments. In the Ring of Fire in northern Ontario, it'll be other minerals. But the point is that First Nations should be the primary beneficiaries of what comes out of their lands, and they should have the opportunity to go ahead with projects that improve their lives while contributing to Canada. Well, I think we need to put an end to the Ottawa knows best mentality, where politicians and bureaucrats in the nation's capital dictate to First Nations. That has not worked. That is the old way of the gut crown that has caused so much misery over so many years. And we need to get to restore to First Nations control of their own lives, their own decisions, and their own land. And I'm here to listen on how that can be done. I'm also here to listen about how we can remove the government gatekeepers that stand in the way of development and opportunity in First Nations communities. You look at the NDP; they don't offer any solutions. They just want to keep things the way they are. And the problem with that is that the system doesn't work right now. We need to give First Nations more control over their land, money, and decisions. We need to make it easier for First Nations to opt out of various sections of the Indian Act. Right now, it's possible to opt out of the land regime in the Act and the financial regime in the Act, and opt into a more autonomous approach. I think that's positive, but we need to give other pathways for First Nations to get out from under the control of Ottawa, where they so choose. I mean, those First Nations that are happy under the status quo should have the right to maintain that. But the long-term opportunity of letting First Nations take control of their own decisions away from the paternalistic government in Ottawa is the way that I would like to make possible for those wanting it.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Driven by her passion to see First Nations more involved in business in the provincial and national economy, Lisa Mueller felt compelled to create a platform for First Nations leaders to share their perspectives on economic development and major projects. In this final segment of Open Connection, an unexpected guest arrived at the 2022 Prince Rupert Nation to Nation Forums.
Crash your party. It's great to be here in beautiful British Columbia. I'm born and raised in Alberta. I love being back out in the West. A brief introduction of myself. I was born to a 16-year-old unwed mother who put me up for adoption to two school teachers. And they taught me that it didn't matter where I came from, it mattered where I was going. It didn't matter who I knew, but what I could do. And that's the country I want my kids to inherit. I've got two little ones. I want them to grow up in a country where if you work hard, you can get ahead and achieve your dreams, where we put you back in charge of your life. And that's especially true for First Nations who've been subject to paternalistic controls by the federal government for centuries, where all the power is concentrated with politicians and bureaucrats in Ottawa, when it should be in the hands of the people who know best how to run their own lives using their own traditions and their own way of life. And I want to devolve power and put it back in your hands and let you make your own decisions. That is my philosophy. Of course, our hardworking people need to be able to put food on the table. And that means developing our resources. And Canadians, especially First Nations, know better than anyone in the world how to develop those resources in an environmentally responsible fashion that protects our earth, our air, our water, and our soil. We can do that here in Canada better than anywhere. And by shutting down our resource development, all we do is send that development to other places around the world that don't have our standards, that make us more reliant on foreign dictatorships, rather than more self-sufficient and reliant on our own people. I believe that we should transform dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people by repealing the anti-energy laws, replace them with new laws that respect First Nations, protect the earth, but also get things done. Let's develop our energy. Let's get our 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas to market so that we can shut down Asian coal-fired plants and reduce global emissions. Let's send it over to Europe so that we can break European dependence on Putin and bring the dollars from that dictatorship that is now funding a war in Ukraine back to support paychecks here in this country. Yes, absolutely. We have a government right now that thinks that fighting climate change is about making traditional energy more expensive. I believe it's the inverse. It's by making new renewable sources of energy more affordable. Let's approve more hydroelectric projects that will deliver emissions-free electricity. Let's master the arts of small modular nuclear reactors so that we can supply Alberta, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick with nuclear power. Let's support Quebec's plans to build new hydroelectric dams so it can send its electricity to northern United States, shut down coal-fired plants there. Let's mine the minerals of electric cars in this country. We have the lithium, the cobalt, the copper, the graphite. We have it here in Canada, but we can't mine it because it takes 5-6 years to get a permit. The investors go to other places with poorer environmental standards, and now when we drive electric cars, how much coal has to have been burned on the other side of the world to make those cars, the batteries, and import them here. We should be producing all of those minerals in this country. We can, we have the people, we have the resources, we just need to get the gatekeepers out of the way so that we can develop our resources and take control of our resource destiny. So, in other words, I'm not here to run the country. I believe people have the ability to run their own lives. I'm not here to be anybody's boss. I'm here because the Prime Minister means prime servant. That's what the word minister actually means. And it's time that we actually had a Prime Minister that understood that his job is to be a servant to the people, not to be their master, just to protect their rights and freedoms and let them build the lives of their dreams. That's why I'm in this. Let's make this the freest country on earth to put you back in charge of your life. Let's get out there and do it. Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.